afternoon there, listening audience. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio, where our motto is to say that we need to investigate what's going on around us, not just do what most people do and just glide through life, and also what Benjamin Franklin said, question authority at all times. Anyway, tonight we have a really special guest. He's an author, he is a historian, a lawyer, and a writer. His name's Robert Sullivan, and he's written about something I find really fascinating, and that's symbolism and, well, what we could call film literature, movies. What is the message that many of us just miss when we are watching our various types of entertainment? Anyway, well, I'm just going to let things go and say hello, Robert.
Thank you so much for having me on Unlock the Door. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to get you on here. You know, I just have to start out real quick here. When I was in college, I did not want to take literature courses, which is ironic now that I write books. But I didn't want to take literature, and I could take film literature in lieu of taking things like English literature and stuff like that. And at the same time, I was concentrating my studies on psychology. And then I saw something really interesting in how one of the pioneers of psychology, that being Carl Jung, and movie psychology seemed to intersect, and how many things that we might take for granted in a film and just think that's just the writer's prerogative, how they've thrown in, really has a deeper meaning. What got you started in this?
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. Carl Jung and people like Joseph Campbell, I talk about repeatedly in the Cinema Symbolism book. What got me started in this was I had started when I was an associate student in my college days, and this was back in 1992 at Oxford University. I was a history major. I never matriculated at Oxford, but I was an associate student at St. Catherine's College. When I was over there, I really got interested and was exposed to what you would sort of call the Hermetic tradition and its influence and impact on material culture. At any rate, I started researching this more and more, and things like secret societies, mysticism, Hermeticism, and how it impacted and influenced society both on a material level, on a psychological level, and even on a religious and even in some cases an economic level. And this just really always fascinated me. I became a Freemason myself in 1997. I joined the Scottish Rite in 1999, and I was writing and researching this book, which eventually came out in August of 2012, called The Royal Arch of Enoch. And in this book, I documented this previous, never before presented historical anomaly. I know you want to talk about the movie book, so when I was doing Royal Arch and I completed it, I kind of wanted to bring it up to the 21st century, and I talked, and the Royal Arch of Enoch concluded with sort of an analysis of what I would describe as sort of a Masonic solar Enochian symbolism that I would see turning up in movies. I talked about the National Treasure films. I talked about the Excalibur movie, which is a solar astrological allegory. I talked about the Da Vinci Code movie, which incorporates a lot of very hidden Masonic themes in it. And so this was something that just really, I became very interested in. And as I was finishing this book off, I was seeing the same sort of, I guess that the best word I can use to describe it is arcana and mysticism turning up in other movies. Not necessarily Masonic per se, but things, alchemy and astrology and the mystery schools and Gnosticism and Kabbalah, and, Jung, the archetypes, collective unconscious, the animus, the anime turning up in popular movies. And of course, I couldn't put this all in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. The book would never have ended. So when I finished Royal Arch, I started writing this new book, or my second book called Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies, where I sort of carried forward this final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch, and I presented these other esoteric occult themes that I saw turning up in movies, and I basically wrote this book, sort of interpreting these movies through this sort of occult lens, applying, like you're absolutely correct, the teachings of Carl Gustav Jung and Joseph Campbell and alchemy, and how these filmmakers were intentionally, in my opinion, placing these symbols and these hidden themes in movies to sort of turn celluloid into modern mythology is really the best way I would describe it to you and your listeners.
Well, do you think this is something that's just part of the creative license and people just throw it in for fun? Or is it meant to, well, some people in alternative media would say it's to proselytize people in kind of a new age Luciferianism or something like that? Or is it just trying to connect to the collective unconsciousness, as Jung pointed out?
I think in some cases it can be a combination of any and all three of these. I think in some cases, although it does seem to be the minority of the cases, it appears accidentally. I generally don't buy into coincidences. I mean, I think a lot of times it is intentionally placed. I think a lot of times it is the idea of the collective unconscious, things like mythology, sorcery, alchemy, that we're all tapped into, which is inherited. And these movies, I mean, film and cinema is an extremely powerful conduit. And you know, it's a power in the modern world we live in. So by incorporating this iconography, you're drawing into this vast reservoir of mythology that subconsciously we're hooked upon. And these filmmakers are very well aware of this. And you'll find mythology, underlying popular movies, or being the template for many a popular movie. This is well documented, and I talk about it in the book, things like, the Star Wars movies. This comes straight out of the world of Joseph Campbell. You talk about the movies such as the Matrix trilogy. I mean, this is the straight Gnostic religion. So yes, I mean, using these underlying mythological and esoteric undercurrents to turn, what you would call just a movie celluloid into a modern day myth or a fairy tale. These guys are masters at doing, and that is certainly part of their motivation. I don't really go into the idea that there is this sort of, evil, demonic, hidden, group of devil worshippers in Hollywood that are incorporating this material into movies. I think, in a lot of cases, when you see something like this in a film or an eye in a triangle where it may not have any meaning, this could be a filmmaker's deliberate intent to try to stir up people and say, oh, look, there's the eye in the triangle, this is Luciferianism, this is the Illuminati. I think in some cases, this could be sometimes, with some of the stuff with Walt Disney, with a phallic symbol in the background. This could be sometimes an inside joke between, the cartoonist or something to that effect, or the animator, or the sketch artist. Certainly that's a possibility as well. But overall, when I was doing this book, I mean, I was definitely finding these themes turning up in these movies, and it had become apparent to me. I'm not trying to sidestep the question. I mean, in my opinion, and I do emphatically state this, I do believe this material is intentionally placed for the most part, and I do believe these filmmakers are very aware of this and know what they're doing, and certainly the movie-making industry in Burbank, California is literally printing money off of this material. So I do believe it is, in most, if not all cases, intentionally placed.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we take a look at the original, I mean, if you think back to the late 70s, early 80s, the original Battlestar Galactica was pretty much a Mormon theme interwoven within the plot. So I can't think that, other directors wouldn't put something into their movies as well.
Oh, absolutely. This is something I talk about in the book. It's certainly religious symbolism, the Savior archetype. We talk about the Matrix movies is Gnosticism 101. You will find a lot of Egyptian mythology turning up in the Back to the Future trilogy. A lot of solar allegories going on in that movie. You'll find this also in Being There, which also has a lot of religious solar iconography in it. You'll find the Savior archetype, the Jesus Christ figure, repeatedly turning up in film. James Cole in 12 Monkeys, JC, who is, sent back in time to save Earth from itself. Superman, the only begotten Son, sent to planet Earth with supernatural powers again to save mankind from itself. So yeah, I mean, you'll definitely, religious and mythological underpinnings in film. Yes, I mean, that is clearly in there. I don't dispute that at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, elaborate a little bit on that one movie there. I mean, that's one of my wife's favorite movies. The Back to the Future series. You've mentioned that it's retelling the mythology, the Sun family of Egypt. Could you explain to the audience how that works?
Yes, Mike. You cut out there for a little bit on that question.
Okay.
Was it Back to the Future you were asking?
Yes,
about?
Back to the Future and how that relates to the Egyptian Sun family.
Sure, absolutely. This is the Back to the Future trilogy. Really, is probably one of my all-time favorite movies and trilogies to dissect. It was probably one of my favorite chapters to write in the book. And you really have a lot of esoteric solar and Egyptian mythology going on in those three movies. You have the Sun family of Horus, who is Marty McFly, Jennifer, who is his lunar girlfriend. Of course, the name Jennifer comes from the name Guinevere, who is the lunar queen to King Arthur, who is, of course, the sun, the alchemical wedding, the unification of the sun and moon, Arthur and Guinevere. So you have Marty as the sun child, Horus, who is comparatively Apollo or Helios, and then you have his Egyptian mother and father, Isis, who is Lorraine, and then you have George, who is Osiris, and of course Osiris is killed and resurrected, and you'll find that happening in Back to the Future Part 2, where George McFly is killed, but is ultimately resurrected via the aid of Lorraine and Marty, which of course is comparatively correct, as Osiris is resurrected via Isis and Horus. And then of course their arch enemy is Typhon, who is of course fifth canon. Their last names are all but phonetically the same. This is the arch enemy of the Sun family of Egypt. Of course, he's the arch enemy of the McFly family in Back to the Future. And you have the McFlys residing in Lion Estate. And Lion is, of course, a very esoteric reference to Leo the Lion, which is the soul house of the sun. And then you have the whole thing with the DeLorean, the sun chariot of Apollo or Horus, who is his Egyptian equivalent. This can, of course, break the space-time continuum until it hits 88 miles per hour. The lightning strikes the clock tower at 10:04 at night. 10:04 is, of course, a very esoteric reference to the date of October 4th, which is the 277th day in the solar calendar, which means there are 88 days left, which is why the DeLorean or the Sun Chariot has to basically get invested with solar power to activate it at 88 miles an hour. And then you have the Doc Brown character, who is the sort of Hermes Trismegistus character, the wizard, and of course, you'll find the number 5 surrounding him with the date November 5th, 1955. This comes out of the Egyptian tarot of Aleister Crowley, with the 5th card being the Hierophant, and Crowley's take on it was that this is the master of space-time, so you'll have that iconography very adroitly concealed. And I mean, just the whole Back to the Future films, I mean, just is a lot of just very, I'm just tipping the iceberg here with this. There's a lot more going on, but just for time constraints, I mean, but you'll have Zemeckis, I mean, really playing mind games with you. The opening of the Back to the Future trilogy, part 1, is actually the end of the movie, so you're symbolically going back in time, where you're looking at, the movie opens with all of Brown's timepieces, and you'll see the little man hanging off the clock handle, or the clock hand. This is foreshadowing the end of the movie with Brown hanging off the clock tower at the end. And if you pay attention, the little figure is actually dressed the exact same as Brown is at the end of the movie. Then you'll see the little wino drink the wine, and again, this foreshadows the end of the movie where where Marty McFly returns at the end and is confronted by the wino. And then you'll hear the ad for Statler Toyota dealership at the very beginning of the movie, which is a reference to the very end of the movie. Statler Toyota is where Marty gets his truck from at the very end of the movie. So you'll find a lot of solar iconography going on in this, a lot of retelling of the Egyptian Osirian cycle and Back to the Future. You'll find some tarot card iconography going on and embodiment going on with Back to the Future. I get into it much more explicitly into the book, but definitely Back to the Future is a very well concealed solar Egyptian myth. And again, this, as Carl Gustav Jung would say, this is drawing straight out of the collective unconscious. although I do believe this is intentionally placed. I mean, I don't think this is an accident or anything like that. It would just be, it's just too overwhelming, the sequence of numbers, the nameplate, and the symbolism surrounding the family. So, I mean, yeah, the Back to the, and I talk about in the book some of the symbolism of Part 2 and Part 3 as well, but, yeah, Back to the Future, a lot of solar iconography with the Egyptian Osirian cycle going on.
I want to get back into movies here in just a moment, but it just reminds me, when I was in college, one of the classes I took, a graduate level course, was, I think it was called something like pseudo-psychology. And it dealt a lot with occult themes. And when I first signed up for that, I had thought that, occult was like these things where, kind of the outsider type people were involved in it and that sort of thing. And then it was pointed out that during the 19th century, this was something that was very strong within people who had a lot of influence. Government, wealthy people, and so forth were very steeped in these issues and studies, especially, like you said, Egypt. Now, where did your studies take? Yeah, what's the influence of this? You look at American history books, you don't usually find too many references to any of this esoteric information, unless you dig really, really, really deep. And yet it seems to be something that was actually very important to the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers. What has your research pointed out in how this kind of stuff has influenced American and European history?
Oh my goodness, I totally agree with you 100%. I mean, you are talking about the Hermetic tradition and its influence on policy formation and government. I mean, my goodness gracious, yes. I mean, there is this heavy occult influence going on, and you are 100. I mean, this is what got me interested at Oxford University, was stumbling onto this at the first. This is where I first stumbled onto this, and I was fascinated by it. And I totally agree with you. I mean, good grief. I mean, whenever you look at world leaders and governments, you will find this heavy occult influence upon them. Queen Elizabeth I with Dr. John Dee, the founders of the United States with Freemasonry and Hermeticism, and the occult coming out of the Renaissance. These are names completely left out of our history books. Marcello Ficino, the white magician, the white Christian Kabbalist. Giordano Bruno, who's a Dominican friar, who is basically the godfather of Hermeticism. You go into the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, Athanasius Kircher, who said Christianity, I mean, this is a Jesuit talking, said Christianity is just the Egyptian religion recycled. You will find Rasputin, the mystic, on the Russian family, Nazi Germany, Hitler, Himmler, Goebbels, all influenced by, Madame Blavatsky, Theosophy, mysticism. You have Abraham Lincoln calling in, psychics into the White House to try to conjure the spirit of their dead son, Tad, excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, you always find, it seems that, you dig deep enough, you will find this, esoteric and occult influence going on behind world leaders. I mean, I totally agree with you. And you'll find Rudolph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, was fascinated by alchemy and mysticism. James I, the guy who did the James I Bible, was also a Mason and influenced by mysticism and the Hermetic tradition in Egypt. So yes, I mean, you will find this repeatedly going on with world leaders and the form, and its influence. And this is what really got me started, was when I was in England was discovering this. And it's a fascinating study. And you are 100% correct. I mean, this is what motivated me, was discovering this material and then learning that this stuff has just been completely erased from our history books. I mean, I talk about this in my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. I have a chapter in that book titled The United States of Freemasonry, which I basically describe the United States of America as as the world's first Masonic republic. And I talk about some of the Masonic architecture in places like Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, Maryland. I mean, you really want to get into it. You get into things like, I mean, this has been totally erased from our history. The Erie Canal, America's westward expansion, which is Masonic expansion westward. The Erie Canal was dedicated in a Royal Arch ceremonial. People like DeWitt Clinton, Ezra Ames. These are names who are critical to American history, and again have just been completely erased from our history books. John Dee, the sorcerer, who was Queen Elizabeth's personal astrologer. I mean, there are so many mathematical theories that this guy put out. Again, I mean, just someone who has been unilaterally, by and large, left out of history books. So, you dig deep enough, and again, this is what motivated me for writing the Royal Arch of Enoch. Just this idea of this this heavy Masonic influence that was going on with the Founding Fathers, and Hermetic and the occult tradition coming out, of the Enlightenment, and then in turn from the Renaissance. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and you dig deep enough, and, it's definitely there. I mean, that's irrefutable. And, if you're interested in what I'm saying about this, definitely check out my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. I documented all, this architecture and this symbolism, which you will find all over the place once you know where to look for it.
Well, I've heard some say that America was supposed to be like, what, the new Atlantis or something like that?
Yeah, that comes out of the works of Francis Bacon. You'll find the New Atlantis. You'll find numerous utopian, Masonic, or quasi-Masonic references. You get into the Federal District, Washington, D.C. I talk about that being a replication of this utopian city written by a Dominican friar named Tomaso Campanella. He wrote a novella called The City of the Sun. And of course, if you're familiar with Freemasonry, you will know that the sun is probably the most important symbol within Freemasonry. And he talks about how the City of the Sun had this giant Capitol building sitting on a hill that had a dome on it. And of course, this is something else I talk about in the Royal Arch of Enoch, domes on buildings. This comes out of the works of the architect Vitruvius and Renaissance masters such as Palladio and Battista, where the dome building is the chamber of the sun god Apollo. So you'll find, again, numerous solar and Masonic esoteric architecture in the Federal District. You will find this in Baltimore, Maryland. You will find it with the dedication of the Erie Canal. You will find it in colleges, in templates of college campuses, of architectural design of college campuses, on, my goodness gracious, on state seals, on college coat of arms. You'll find it in the American fraternal system with sororities and fraternities. It's a real deep study. I wrote a 700-page book about it, titled The Royal Arch of Enoch. This was my first book, and this was the book, like I was saying at the top of the show, that basically I brought up to the 21st century by talking about this, esoteric, Masonic, and solar symbolism concealed in popular movies, which birthed my second book, Cinema Symbolism. So yes, I mean, I don't dispute this. Definitely check if you're interested in Masonic and solar, and its has esoteric influence on the development of the United States. Check out the Royal Arch of Enoch.
Oh yeah, I definitely encourage audience to check that out. Hey, just out of curiosity, I've heard different things. The Statue of Liberty, is that supposed to be a representation of like Minerva or Inanna or something? I mean, I've heard that. I don't know if it's true.
Right, absolutely. I've got a whole study on the Statue of Liberty in the book. The Statue of Liberty is a temple to the number 7, and this is paralleling this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. If you read the book, and this is a real long study, I'm going to try to condense the answer as quickly as I can. But basically, the Royal Arch of Enoch is a Masonic ritual, part of the high degree system. It's the 13th in the Scottish Rite. It's the 7th in the York Rite of Freemasonry. And you'll find, if you know to look for it, again, it's a deep study, the number 7 and the number 13 are repeatedly turning up. It's probably the most important ritual in Masonic in Freemasonry, or at least one of the most important, because it's the recovery of what is lost in the Blue Lodge, which is the name of God, known in Freemasonry as the Tetragrammaton. But to answer your question, the Statue of Liberty has much esoterica surrounding it. You will find the number 7 encoded. You will find the statue it's a re-gift. It was originally a gift to Egypt. They rejected it, and you will find the crown with 7 points. This is a reference to this Egyptian goddess Seshat, who is the female counterpart of an Egyptian god known as Hermes Trismegistus. And again, Seshat is sort of this female wisdom goddess who is, again, comparatively Minerva or Pallas Athena. You will find this turning up in the first college founded after the Revolution, which offered high degrees in in civil engineering or operative masonry, called Union College in Schenectady, New York. The symbol or the emblem of Union College is Minerva with the Masonic logo. We are all brothers now under the laws of Minerva. This is a very deep study, but you will find that the template of Union College is the sunburst. It's the domed building coming out of the vault of Enoch. And again, this is a real deep study, and again, it ties into this high-degree system, this high-degree ritual known as the Royal Arch of Enoch, which is the restoration of all antediluvian wisdom. So you'll find this Enochian symbolism going on at Union College in New York, but the Statue of Liberty is a whole study. I have in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, you have pagan goddess symbolism, you have Egyptian symbolism, you have the number 7 symbolism, which again is paralleling this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, which is the 7th degree in the York Rite. So yeah, I get into various architectural symbolisms in Royal Arch. Statue of Liberty is one. The House of the Temple, the Scottish Rite headquarters in Washington, the George Washington Masonic Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. Those three structures are replications of of 3 of the 7 ancient man-made wonders of the world, where you have the Statue of Liberty being the Colossus of Rhodes. The Mausoleum of Halicarnassus is the Scottish Rite House of the Temple, and the George Washington Masonic Memorial is the Lighthouse of Alexandria, Egypt. This is why it sits in Alexandria, Virginia. Deep study, and again, for more on this Masonic esoteric symbolism and architecture, I invite your audience to read my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Symbolism, the Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. This was my first published book, and this came out in 2012.
Okay. By the way, too, Minerva's on the California flag, isn't she?
She is part of, that is another Masonic Enochian symbolism. I get into the State Seal of California, where you have Minerva with the word Eureka over it. This is an Enochian word that references the vault of Enoch. And you'll find a little miner on the State Seal of California digging towards the underground vault. Of course, exoterically, this is a miner, but that the entire State Seal of California comes from, it's Enochian from start to finish. It comes from the first seal of the Grand Lodge of Oddfellows in California, which was basically founded by a Freemason named Leland Stanford, he's the founder of Stanford University. So you'll have I have a whole study on the State Seal of California with Leland Stanford and the Oddfellows. It is literally the State Seal of California is literally a replication of this Grand Seal of the Oddfellows Grand Lodge of California. But yes, you will find Minerva on the State Seal of California with the word Eureka and the little guy tunneling towards the underground vault.
One interesting thing here before I go on is that, I know I have a sense of what you're talking about here, but maybe some people might not be aware or into this, and that is the idea that, I guess in Freemasonry, the idea is that the story of Noah in the Bible is a little incomplete. There's a lot more it goes to it.
Well, right, yeah, it's a long story, but this is what's going on in this Masonic ritual, where what you have is, and this was the whole thrust of the Royal Arch of Enoch book, was you had this Royal Arch ceremonial coming out of France in the 1740s, 1750s, incorporating elements of the apocryphal Book of Enoch, which was lost to history at the time. That the mainstream historical account is the Book of Enoch, one Enoch, the Ethiopian text, is out of circulation in the West, in European and in Western civilization from around the 2nd, 3rd century until a man named James Bruce returns with copies in 1773. And then even then they are untranslated until 1821. The translated copy is it occurs at the Bodleian Library at Oxford University. So basically, until the 2nd, 3rd century, until 1821, the Book of Enoch is out of circulation in Europe, but you will find this high-degree Masonic ceremonial incorporating these elements and components from the Book of Enoch, which is the restoration of this antediluvian, anti-flood of Noah wisdom. The Enoch gleans from his interaction from archangels and watchers, this sort of fallen angel group. This is documented in the Book of Enoch. And of course, in the Masonic ceremonial and in the underlying Masonic philosophy and ritual, what you have going on is Enoch comes back to earth with this knowledge from the fallen angels and the archangels, and he catches word that the flood of Noah is coming, and that God is trying to eradicate this wisdom that he has by destroying mankind. So what Enoch decides to do is he's going to trick God, and what he does trick God is when the flood of Noah comes. Noah is his grandson, I want to say, or his great-grandson. What Enoch does is he takes this hidden wisdom and inscribes it on 2 pillars and buries it in this subterranean vault under 9 archways. And in between these 2 pillars, he puts what's called the tetragrammaton, which is a fancy way of saying the name of God. And it's only through the correct pronunciation of this name that the wisdom on these 2 pillars is restored. So he does this. The flood of Noah comes, wipes out mankind, but the wisdom in the vault survives the flood. And what we're talking right now is the heart of anti-Masonry, that Freemasons are the preservers of this wisdom that God was trying to destroy with the flood of Noah. In the Old Testament, the wisdom that Enoch gleans, or that comes in possession of, is considered evil because God is trying to destroy it with the flood. In the Book of Enoch, in 1 Enoch, even though the wisdom in some instances comes from these fallen angel beings, the wisdom is still considered divine. In the Masonic ritual, and really more in its underlying philosophy, this Royal Arch ceremonial, again, part of the high-degree system, the candidate, the lost name of God is recovered in this Enochian subterranean vault, and this antediluvian wisdom is restored. And if you're familiar, we're going into really deep Masonic lore and legend here. If you're familiar with this, and if your listeners are not, I will explain. In the Masonic ritual, and its underlying story, basically, the vault is breached by these 2 people at first, prior to the Freemasons getting to it. The first character is Pythagoras, the mathematician, and he goes into the vault and he sees the name of God and he correctly pronounces it and he says, "Eureka, I have found it," it being the name of God, and restores the mathematical pillar and mathematics back to mankind. The other character who goes in is a guy named Hermes Trismegistus, who is this Egyptian wizard sage figure, and he correctly pronounces the tetragrammaton and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences, the other pillar, back to mankind. And it's this wisdom that is really preserved and restored back to mankind in this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial through the recovery of the tetragrammaton, the name of God, which, if you're familiar with Blue Lodge ritual and symbology, is lost in the Blue Lodge upon the death of Hiram Abiff. And again, this is a 700-page book I wrote about this called The Royal Arch of Enoch. If you're interested in what I've been talking about, please check that book out as well. Again, it's called The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual Philosophy and Symbolism. That book came out in 2012.
Interesting. I just have to ask this. A lot of people didn't really understand the Russell Crowe Noah movie. They watched it, and some of the reviewers, especially alternative media conservatives, were like, This story doesn't make any sense. It's just something just kind of thrown together. And yet I thought that really it had a lot of stuff that seemed like it was more from what you just said.
Yeah, Mike, you're breaking up on me. I couldn't hear anything on that last question.
Oh, I was just saying that it sounds like the new Russell Crowe movie, Noah, that a lot of people felt just they didn't understand it. They said, well, this just doesn't make sense at all. It sounded actually, a lot of the elements seemed to be from the Book of Enoch.
I believe you were asking me. I couldn't hear the question. It broke up. I got that you're asking me about the Russell Crowe Noah film.
Yeah.
I have not seen that yet, but I know that there is. I have not seen it, but I know talking to people that have informed me there is this whole Gnostic Enoch theme going on, where you have the perpetrator of the flood is being basically identified with what the Gnostics called the demiurge, or the lesser god of the material world. I have been told that's the case, but in truth, I have not seen the Russell Crowe Noah movie yet, and having not seen it, I wouldn't comment on it. I will say this, though, and here is a movie that I have seen and I do talk about in the Royal Arch of Enoch, is if you wish to see this Masonic ritual, the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial played out on the big screen, turn to the first National Treasure movie. The first National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage is a Masonic ritual. If you watch that movie, you are literally watching a Masonic ritual on the big screen. The Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, the Masonic ritual, is the recovery of this Masonic treasure, the name of God, in the subterranean vault, underground beneath the Holy Ground. In the ritual, it's the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And this is what you have in the National Treasure movie. It's the recovery of the treasure of Freemasonry beneath the Holy Ground in New York. So if you wish to literally see the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial played out on the big screen, I invite you and your listeners to watch the first National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage.
Okay, quite interesting. What's another movie besides Back to the Future that would really surprise people if they actually analyzed it?
Well, there's a lot of them out there. Certainly, the first. I'm just going to breeze over a couple here. You have the Exorcist movie. There's some really unique hidden symbolisms going on in that. You have the whole idea of the little girl being possessed by darkness, forces of darkness. And you have the two sun priests, the Jesuits, and of course the symbol for the Society of Jesus is the sun, calling in. So you have this whole idea of what's called Manichaean cosmology. This comes straight out of Gnosticism, of light versus darkness. You'll find this also in the doctrines of Zoroastrianism. It predates Christianity, of light versus darkness, where the sun or the two Jesuits are shining light to cast out the darkness from the little girl. You have some real interesting iconography going on in The Exorcist. You have the Damien Karras Jesuit priest character, who is a Jesuit. He's a Christian, but he doubts his own faith throughout the movie. If you pay attention to this film, when you watch The Exorcist, I invite your viewers to do this. When you watch Karras in the movie, not all the time, but he is usually in a state of ascent. He's always climbing up steps or going up a hill or going up a staircase. And this comes straight out of the doctrine of Gnosticism, of what's called ascensio, which is climbing a ladder to obtain wisdom. And again, this is symbolized by his doubt in the movie. He doubts, but he's always climbing. He's always investigating. And you'll actually find this. You'll find a very unique symbol, a couple of them placed in this movie. He is the priest at the very end of the movie that exorcises the demon from the little girl. He basically takes the demon and then kills himself at the end. So he becomes the girl's basically personal savior. And in doing so, he achieves apotheosis by becoming godlike or Christ-like. And believe it or not, when you watch The Exorcist, the first time you see Karras on screen, he's climbing a staircase or a flight of steps into a train station, into a subway platform, and he's coming up from 33rd Street of all places. And of course, this is a very esoteric reference to Jesus Christ, who was on earth for 33 years, being crucified at the age of 33. So the movie makers are investing Karras as his Christ-like savior as the little girl from a very early point in this movie. And again, you'll see this as Karras is constantly climbing steps and constantly moving upwards. And then, of course, he does successfully exorcise the demon from the little girl at the end, and this is what he achieves, he achieves apotheosis. He changes, and this would be a form of Kabbalah or alchemy, by affecting change or transmutation, by getting the demon out of the girl into him. He becomes godlike, her personal savior. But, of course, he dies by falling down the flight of steps at the very end of the movie, symbolizing his doubt about Christianity and his own faith. So, although he achieves apotheosis, he dies falling down the flight of steps. symbolizing his own doubt that permeates the movie. And as he's laying there at the very bottom of the steps at the end, after he's dying, you're going to see the word pigs spray painted to the left of the screen as graffiti right next to Father Karras. And this, of course, is a reference to the gospel tale where Jesus Christ cast out the demon legion from a man and cast it into a flock of pigs. So what the filmmaker is symbolically telling you there is the exorcism has worked. Karras has cast the demon out, but of course it cost him his life at the end. You'll also find some very, very interesting play on the weather in The Exorcist, where and they do this. Stanley Kubrick does this years later in The Shining. Movies of Exorcist, where you have the entire film, The Exorcist, being set in autumn, early winter. We know this because when at the very beginning of the movie, when Friedkin doesn't flash anything on the screen that says October 31st, 1972. But at the very beginning of the movie, when Chris McNeil, the mother, is leaving Georgetown after filming the movie within the movie actually, she is accosted by a group of trick-or-treaters. So we know the date is October 31st, and of course we know time-wise this is the sun in the northern hemisphere entering decay. Darkness is taking over. The days are becoming shorter. We're moving towards the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. So light, solar light, the resurrected Savior, Christ, is in a state of decay, and darkness is taking over. This is a very, very, way to play on your subconscious mind that darkness is now taking over, is entering Georgetown, is entering the McNeil household. And he does this by flashing these trick-or-treaters, identifying the date of Halloween, which is, of course, October 31st, a few weeks, about a month and a half after the autumn equinox. And this is why Halloween sits when it does. It's the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, which is the celebration of the darker half taking over. And it's darkness entering Georgetown. It's the sun, light in decay. Stanley Kubrick does this exact same trick a few years later in the Shining movie, where the Torrance family are moving into the hotel, and when Jack Torrance, or Jack Nicholson, is interviewing with Ullman, Ullman says to him that the hotel is open, I want to say from the middle of May, but they close on October 30th. So you know that when the Torrances arrive at the hotel and you see all the people moving out, the guests have left, this is October 31st. The hotel closed the day before. So you know the Torrances are moving in on October 31st. Again, Halloween, death, darkness, decay, all the ghosts, all the darkness now come out to play in the hotel, and you'll find this also in The Exorcist. The Exorcist also has a really unique scene in it where Friedkin plays with Da Vinci's Last Supper painting, and you'll find it in the scene where Chris McNeil is at the Barringer Clinic and is surrounded by the doctors. That scene is literally a replication of Da Vinci's Last Supper painting, where you have Chris, the mother, Christ, at the head of the table, surrounded by the four groups of three, which is the four groups of doctors, each divided into three. And this is where they tell her that a spiritual, cure is needed for the daughter. So by doing that, Friedkin literally recreates the Da Vinci's Last Supper painting for you on the screen, and this is again a reference that you're going to need to, you're going to have a Catholic Christian exorcism to get this demon out of the daughter of the little girl. So yeah, I'm just plowing through some stuff with some really unique stuff in The Exorcist. It's the first chapter of the book. You'll find this thing play around with the weather, with darkness, going on in the Omen movies as well. And I mentioned it with The Shining. So yeah, I mean, these guys definitely know their material and definitely know how to implant it in movies. The Exorcist is chapter 1 of the Cinema Symbolism book, and the Omen trilogy, I should say, is chapter 2 in Cinema Symbolism.
Interesting. That's kind of dark movies there, Shining and Exorcist. What about something a little lighter, like Wizard of Oz?
Oh my goodness gracious! Yeah, I mean, Wizard of Oz Great. That's another chapter in the book. You have 3 levels of symbolism going on with the Wizard of Oz movie. Number 1, you have what I would call your profane explanation, which is this is about a little farm girl who gets whisked away to this magical land, has an adventure, comes home, movie over. This would be sort of the same interpretation of Alice in Wonderland. But then you have these 2 deeper levels of of allegory going on in in Wizard of Oz, which is the political symbolism, which is the retelling of political, social, economic America from about 1895 to around 1905. The man who, and then additionally, the man who wrote The Wizard of Oz is a man named L. Frank Baum. Baum and his wife were members of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy Society, and Theosophy was a very popular neo-Gnostic movement in the 19th century. It was founded by a Russian woman named Madame Blavatsky. Probably a lot of your listeners know that name. But Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, incorporates 2 levels of symbolism into The Wizard of Oz. Number 1 is you have this political allegory going on. This one's more well-known, where you have, I'll just go over this briefly, where you have the yellow brick road is the gold standard leading to paper money, which is the Emerald City. It's green, symbolizing green money. The Wizard of Oz politically is William McKinley, who wanted to use gold money to back use gold to back greenbacks. So you have the wizard being the Wizard of Oz, is President William McKinley. In the movie, in the book, the slippers that Dorothy gets are silver, and this symbolized the free silver movement, which was another political economic movement going on, which was the backing of paper money through silver. So you had silver. The story that was told in red was that the silver slippers didn't show up on the yellow. It looked like Judy Garland didn't have any feet, so they just changed it to ruby. But then obviously you have the scarecrow is the American farmer. You have the Tin Man, who is the American laborer. You have the Cowardly Lion, who was again a political allegory for Williams Jennings Bryan and Eugene Debs. Bryan was McKinley's Democratic challenger. Eugene Debs was the socialist. And again, these guys were all bark, no bite. That's why they were a Cowardly Lion. It was just all war, but nothing to it. And then, of course, you have the Tin Man. You have an interesting political allegory, economic allegory going on with him. He can't move at first, and this is symbolizing the Depression of 1896, which cast off a lot of American laborers. They found themselves out of work. They got put back to work by the oil companies of people like Nelson Rockefeller and Morgan, the big industrialists. So in order to get the American laborer moving again, you have to oil him up or use oil. This is why to get in the movie, to get the Tin Man or the American laborer back to work, he has to be oiled up. That's an interesting allegory going on. And then in the movie, you've got another political allegory is the 2 little dancing munchkin groups, the Lollipop League, which is the labor movement, the unionization labor movement, and then the Lullaby League, which is the female group, which is the Sleeping Yet Awakening. This is why they're Lullaby, Sleeping Yet Awakening, women's suffrage movement. But then, just to break off on that, and then, just because I know we don't have all day here, you have this deeper Gnostic theosophy level of symbolism going on in the Wizard of Oz, where you have the idea of epiphany, sublime revelation. For Dorothy Gale, it's the revelation that there's no place like home. And here you have the farm girl going up the tornado. This is the winding staircase of Freemasonry, the ladder of Minerva to receive gnosis in this magical land. And she receives it by being assisted by 3 sojourners who are all after intelligence, a heart, fortitude, and courage. And Madame Blavatsky wrote that in order to be initiated into gnosis, you have to have intelligence, fortitude, and courage. This is why the 3 sojourners all desire those elements. And then, of course, Dorothy is assisted in the book by 2 witches of the north and south, symbolizing upward and downward movement, Ascensio, and again, this is Caris, again, moving up and down the ladder or up and down the staircases in The Exorcist. The two witches that oppose Dorothy are the East and West, symbolizing stagnation. You don't achieve ascensio by moving left to right. You only receive it by moving upwards, spiritual enlightenment. And again, for Dorothy Gale, this is the idea that finally learning that there's no place like home. You'll find this paralleled in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, where Alice has the adventure in the magical land to realize that adults are basically nothing to them. And you'll find Gnostic themes and again, these theosophy themes in The Wizard of Oz. The yellow brick road is the golden path of enlightenment, which leads to the false Gnostic god, the demiurge, the Wizard of Oz, who is the false Messiah. And again, this was a teaching of Gnosticism, to beware of the lesser god of Christianity or Judaism or Islam, that organized religion was basically hot air, who had a false Messiah. And of course, this is paralleled in The Wizard, with the wizard who uses fear and intimidation to gain worship, but ultimately is the harmless little man. There's nothing to him. And of course returns Dorothy back to Kansas in the hot air balloon, religion being hot air. So you have this entire, deep political allegory going on in The Wizard of Oz, and then you have this Gnostic, theosophical, spiritual epiphany story going on in The Wizard of Oz. There's a lot more to it. I could go on forever on this. It's a whole chapter in cinema symbolism. But yeah, Wizard of Oz is a deep study, and it's presented in symbolism. In cinema symbolism, it's a whole chapter.
Do you see symbolism continuing? You must look at trends. Is there more going into movies now, or has it always been kind of the same and continuing?
Yes, I do believe this material has been around for a long time, and I do believe it is continuing. You'll find this esoteric in the works of William Shakespeare, with things like Twelfth Night and Midsummer Night's Dream. You will find a lot of astrological and mysticism. You have witches in Macbeth. So you will have an occult influence in Shakespeare, who, let's be honest, was probably Sir Francis Bacon and his little invisible Knights of the Helmet. And you'll find these same doctrines in things like Mozart's Magic Flute Opera, which has a very Egyptian Illuminati theme to it, underlying it. And then again, you get into the movies. Hollywood, is constantly looking for source material, and is using this material. We talk about it in modern day movies such as The Exorcist, and things like the Matrix movies. I know you were asking me during one of the questions about the Noah movie with Russell Crowe. I don't want to give an analysis of some movie I haven't seen, but again, you're right. It's there. But yet, you go back in time to movies. People have asked me before on other shows that I've been on. How can you find this stuff in movies from the 40s and 50s? Of course you can. You'll find it in the 60s with the James Bond material. Ian Fleming had a very heavy occult influence upon him. You will find it in the Universal horror movies, things like Frankenstein, the Kabbalistic golem, the inanimate object brought to life. You will find it in the Wolfman, which ties into witchcraft. Count Dracula, obviously. You get into the Wizard of Oz, which we were just talking about, again, a movie from this time frame. You get into the whole Robin Hood legend, the legend of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn. Again, you're dealing with a lot of tarot card archetypes and Hebrew Kabbalah. In fact, the Robin Hood legend, this is something I'm researching and putting into my second book I'm writing about movie symbolism, called Cinema Symbolism 2, is the legend of Robin Hood. You will find this comes onto the scene exactly at the same time as the tarot cards. And as Europe is rediscovering Kabbalah, so you will find this nexus with the Robin Hood tale, and a lot of Tarot and Kabbalah symbolism in this as well. And you'll find this on the big screen in a lot of the Robin Hood movies. And again, most notably, the Errol Flynn one really does a good job with it. So you'll find this going back in time. You'll find it in the golden age of Hollywood. You'll find it in movies from the 50s, from the 60s, from the 70s up until modern time. And to answer your question, I do believe it is ongoing, and I do believe it is continuing.
Well, you said the thing about the 40s, and it just came to mind. You've seen the original Fantasia from Walt Disney.
Oh my goodness, yeah, Walt Disney is a whole study.
Yeah, because
Fantasia, yeah.
Yeah, because there's that scene in Fantasia in which it looks like, you have the the centaurs, and I mean, if you really look at that, it's kind of telling the, Enoch or Book of Jasher story of the flood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my goodness gracious, you have in Walt Disney is a subject matter I'm taking on in cinema symbolism too. Walt Disney. I mean, the National Treasure movies are Walt Disney movies. You will have Fantasia with Mickey Mouse, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, using the magic to bring the brooms to life. Night on Bald Mountain, which is basically a satanic magnum opus. Loads of the Disney animated movies from this time frame, things like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. I mean, all come out of the Brothers Grimm. Fairy tales, which invokes a lot of dark sorcery and magic and mysticism. You move forward with Disney, you'll find a lot of mysticism and some very dark esoterica in things like the Witch Mountain movies. That's something else I talk about in cinema symbolism too. So yeah, I mean Walt Disney. Yeah, my goodness, the National Treasure movies, which came out in the 2000s, which have lots of Freemasonic symbolism in it. They're both Walt Disney movies as well. So yeah, I mean Walt Disney is definitely a whole subject matter on its own, and it's something I'm taking on in cinema symbolism too.
Oh, excellent. When you get that one out, I want to have you back on as a guest.
Oh, absolutely, would love to.
Hey, in the last couple minutes here, tell the audience a little bit about essentially how they can find out more about you, your work, and all the stuff that they need to look for in film.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, well, for starters, Mike, thank you for having me on Lock the Door. It's a pleasure being with you today. It was a great show, and I really appreciate you having me on. If you're interested in what I've been talking about, please visit my website for more information. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is this is all lowercase, all connected. It's www.robertwsullivan.iv. That's the letter I, the letter V.com. robertwsullivaniv.com. From there are links to purchase the books, Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies, and the Royal Arch of Enoch book. These books are in paperback. You can get signed copies from my publisher. There are links there. Alternatively, they are in the ebook format. They're on Amazon Kindle, Barnes & Noble Nook, the Apple iBookstore. The ebooks are considerably less than the paperback. So for all you e-readers out there, please check that out. From my website, you can go to my YouTube channel and listen to other broadcasts, podcasts, radio shows I've done. I have a link to my Twitter feed. There are Facebook like pages for Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism, and I have a Facebook like page for Cinema Symbolism too, which I just mentioned is a book I'm writing right now. Everything is on my website. Videos you can watch, contact information for me, links to buy the book. Like I said, YouTube channel. You can listen to other podcasts and radio shows I've done. You can follow me on Twitter, follow me on Google+, become a fan of these books on Facebook. Again, www.robertwsullivaniv.com. It's all connected. It's all lowercase. And again, there's links there to purchase my books, The Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism. And again, all these books are in ebook format as well, Amazon Kindle. And again, that's much cheaper. And Barnes & Noble Nook. And again, for the last time, www.robertwsullivaniv.com. Everything is there to find more about me and how to purchase my books.
Okay, well, excellent. I encourage people to go to your link, and when I put this up on YouTube, I'll include a link at the bottom as well. So, anyway, Robert, thanks, and, wish you luck on this next book coming out.
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me on Unlock the Door. I thought it was a great show. I really appreciate you having me on. I thought we covered a wide variety of topics, both my books, which I really appreciate. And I'm glad to be here. And like I said, when Cinema Symbolism 2 comes out, or if you just want to have me back on again, whatever, I'm glad to come back on. I thought it was a great show, and I really appreciate you having me on, Mike.
Okay, fantastic. And I'm sure my audience feels the same way. Anyway, and speaking of the audience, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to this episode, and hope to see you back next week on Unlock the Door Radio here at UCY TV Productions.
Pictures on the Tracks you can catch every Monday night and Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.